Hello and welcome to Talking Bottom. I'm Matt Brooks.
I'm Paul Tanter.
And I'm Ange Pearson.
Welcome to the new series of Talking Bottom, Series 4 I believe we're calling it. It is the fourth series, would be the reason why we're calling it.
Of Talking Bottom, yeah.
Of Talking Bottom, yeah.
It's the anniversary series,
The anniversary series where we're going through overarching themes of Bottom and things that they've been influenced by, and just like a general thing to stay relevant even though we've run out of episodes to talk about. This episode we are calling it The Human Condition, mainly as a jumping off point based on the play by Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot. Now, something that I stumbled upon arse backwards at the end of like series 2 of Bottom, the Bottoms Out episode, I kind of just thought, I've noticed a little bit of a comparison to this and Waiting for Godot. I wonder if anyone else has stumbled upon this, and it turns out that yes, a lot of people have noticed this. Rik and Ade themselves study drama at Manchester Uni, where no doubt they would have come across this play.
I don't know if they wanked to it.
Why come across?
They came across it, yeah.
Came across, yes.
Maybe after.
Challenging.
Yeah.
Well, as an A-level drama student myself, at the very intelligent and mature age of 17, we were given a bunch of sketches to perform from various plays, part of a movement called the Theatre of the Absurd. We were given weird plays like, I can't even remember the names of some of them, but there was a dusty old couple in a pair of dustbins, or trash cans if you're American, a boy that woke up as a cockroach and his family are in horror with this transformation happening, and a couple of old tramps talking about the human condition standing by a tree. Anyone that studied drama will come across Beckett, but Waiting for Godot is probably his most famous work. It is one of the first plays to make such a big thing out of non-action and pauses, getting into existential philosophy and surreal concepts. And in the same way that fire has gone on to influence inventions like the car and space travel, Beckett's influence crop up in many, many, many different things that you wouldn't really think about. But fuck me, it is hard work when you first start reading it, especially as an angry teenager. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different podcasts who are going to talk about theatre and Beckett in much more intelligent detail than we would.
Well, we're going to be comparing it with Bottom, and we're going to be trying to ground it in that rather than just going on and on and on about the one play and analysing it.
Yeah,
and of course...
Although I will say, if there's anyone listening looking to learn something for their GCSE, A-level or degree course, thinking you want to get some nugget or insight, go somewhere else, okay?
Unless you're writing a comparative thesis on Bottom and Beckett.
Yeah, but we're not pretending to be experts on this.
No, but I do have someone that's an expert on not only Waiting for Godot, but the performance of Waiting for Godot. I've been in touch with the agent of Mr. Adrian Emerson, and he's going to phone in today at some point. It's meant to be, we'll just edit it in seamlessly at a point, but we're waiting for him to call, and that'll happen as part of this thing.
Okay, so we can't finish until they've called.
No, so we are waiting for Edison, then we will.
He said yesterday that he was going to call, and he didn't.
Did he? When did he say this?
Don't you remember?
Yesterday? I don't remember this.
Oh.
When was? What happened yesterday?
Maybe it didn't happen. Okay.
But a boy came in and told us that
he's definitely going to call, right?
Yeah. He assured us he would call today.
Okay, cool. Okay, I guess we'll just hang around and do nothing.
Okay. So, what year did this come out? That's it's like a film.
Beckett wrote it, I believe, between something like 49 and 53. It took him a few years to actually get it all together.
And he wrote it originally in French, right?
I don't know if he was French. Godot or Godot, people in America mispronounce it as Godot. Well, I mean, mispronounce, I don't know.
Beckett wasn't French, he was Irish.
Okay.
Just to make sure we've definitely got that. But he was living in Paris at the time.
And he wrote a lot of his plays in French and translated them into English for, I don't know, a reason. Language.
Presumably he was presenting them in French to the French audience where he was, and then obviously they got translated and they went round the world.
Yeah. When I was reading about it, the things I read said that it was generally inferred that the two main characters were probably Irish. It's not said explicitly, but it's sort of generally assumed to be that.
It's got some vibe of it.
Right.
It's funny, I've watched the version I've watched, which is on YouTube, is the Irish one. As in it's two Irish actors who are playing it, and with the accents it seems to play really well for me, but I haven't watched any other, so I'm sure it would be amazing to watch it in any other language or in any other accent, but it felt right to hear it in that lilting Irish.
Complaining, self-effacing.
Yeah,
the duologue back and forth, the talking over each other very quickly in the section stuff. It really is a two-hander, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Godot. It just really worked.
It's funny you mention that because I watched probably the same one that you watched, the two Irish guys on a very grey sort of large set.
It's the TV version.
Yeah.
I thought it was better to watch that because I'd love to watch it in the theatre, but I feel sometimes watching theatre plays on camera, you lose a lot in translation. So I thought, well, I'll watch the one that's meant for telly.
I watched that and I thought, yes, the performances from the two guys with their accents and their ages, they came across with a certain amount of gravitas. They felt, now I'm sure this will be something we'll talk about, they felt to me like they could have been there for 1,000 years living in the same place. But then I didn't watch all of an American one, but I did watch like the first 10 minutes of an American version with the actor Zero Mostel, who people would know as the agent in The Producers. I think he's the agent, the Gene Wilder version of the film. And I watched it and it was him and someone else and it was like such a different thing. It's like two wisecracking Americans. Half the time one of them was kept on playing things to the camera and it was like they had their bada bing bada bam, sort of back and forth very good, but it was like just two wisecracking guys.
And are they pronouncing it Godot or Godot?
Oh no, they said Godot.
I wasn't aware of this, but apparently the more kind of accepted pronunciation in English or in England and around these parts is Godot, and in America they say Godot. There's a big argument as to which way it is, and apparently in French, I looked it up apparently in French because of course it was written in French, and Beckett apparently never confirmed which way you're meant to say it, but in French it should just literally be Godot, so it shouldn't have an emphasis on either syllable.
For the guy who wrote it, it sounds like he confirmed fucking nothing about it.
But because that was the point, I think he wanted you to interpret it the way in which you interpret it.
I hate artists.
I hate that.
But that's the whole point.
It sounds like you have, it wasn't grown on a tree. It's been created and birthed by you. What you think is what it is.
But the ambiguity is there purposefully. For me, I think if you hear the word Godot and you hear the word Godot, obviously if you hear Godot, you're conjuring up an image of God. If you see it written down, though, if you're reading this play, like there's no way that you're not going to have God spring out from the page.
And yet his response to that is like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, he's saying it isn't necessarily that Godot is God. But if you watch it and you've got obviously a lot of like religion and background in Christianity, you may well, as a viewer, put that onto it. Right. But Beckett very much said it's not necessarily about that. It's up to you.
But with regards to the writer having an influence or being able to tell the actors and things about it, especially if the writer's going to be there when they're rehearsing it or whatever. Most writer-directors, if an actor asks them something, they will give them a very specific answer. It's sometimes you want the actor to bring their own interpretation of it, and there's a freedom that you want to give an actor. But also, if they ask you a question, or then you usually give them a yes or no answer. I thought I would do it this way. What do you think? Yes or no? And so I read about one actor in one of the performances. He inferred that his character, because of the way they spoke, probably had Parkinson's disease. And he didn't infer it. He asked his doctor, what would make a person speak like this? I'm doing this role in this play, but they gradually speak in a certain way. What would make someone do that? And the doctor said they probably have Parkinson's disease. So the actor said to Beckett, I assumed, I'm playing it as though the character has Parkinson's. And Samuel Beckett, who just replied, yes, of course. It's like, well, do you want me to do that or not? Okay, come on, give me some direction here.
Because I thought it was dementia. I'd heard that, I mean, I don't know, that it might be a different thing that I'd read, but the idea of not remembering.
There's certainly some clues of that,
And there's like stuttering, isn't there, and like hesitation. Obviously there's a lot about the pauses and how important it all is in Godot. But the fact that they're so forgetful and they can't remember what's happened and the confusion that comes up from it.
It's very much Dumb and Dumber, isn't it? Because there's one that's more forgetful, but then the one that's reminding him everything stops forgetting. And questioning stuff. There's a really good video on YouTube called The History of Beckett that has a bunch of audio recordings, interviews of the original actors who got the play the first time. I tell you what, it's very gratifying to hear a very well-spoken, intelligent actor talking about receiving this play the first time and thinking, I thought it was a load of nonsense, so I didn't understand a word of it. Him saying, like, okay, good. It didn't make you feel so stupid when you first come and read it, because it is fucking hard work.
It is very hard work to penetrate through, isn't it?
Beckett didn't direct the first one. He has directed performances of it. Now, the story goes in this video that he handed the script over to the director and the actors and said, okay, make out what you want of it. Well, you know, it's whatever you think.
Yeah.
And then went and watched the performance, and I'm like, oh no, this is wrong. So what the fuck were you?
Right. Yeah.
Your time to say this was at the beginning.
That's why you give specific direction. Yeah.
Maybe he was curious to see how it would be interpreted, though, and
wanted
then
that first, and then like right, we come back to it. So
he's such an interesting character, Beckett. I have to confess, before doing this, I hadn't watched Godot, and I've never seen Endgame or any of the other plays or read his novels, and I'd quite like to now. I think it would be really fascinating to try and delve further into it.
The only thing I'd ever read of Beckett's was Waiting for Godot, and I remember it. I read it at university. It did actually have quite a sort of profound effect on me, in that me and some other students at university, we started a little production company group to try and rival the main university's players, and each of us decided we would all direct something that year. And so my friend said to me, look, you're going to direct a play. You need to find something that you're happy to sort of be, you know, living and breathing, and you can learn backwards, and that will amuse you and you'll love, because you need to know it. So, you know, you need to be passionate about it. And he gave me his copy of Waiting for Godot. And I'd heard of it before, but I'd never read it.
Was it a well-worn copy?
It was quite well-worn. I remember it now. It was a white background with green and yellow squares on it. He'd made quite a few notes in it. He was a drama student. And he said, have a read of this. You might really enjoy it. And I read it. And I remember... I was really excited at university, because this is the kind of thing I'd gone there for. Like, I was studying English literature, but I wanted to do dramatic stuff and film things and that kind of thing. And I started reading it, and I was like really excited. And I remember thinking, this is absolutely the biggest load of gibberish, pretentious toss I've ever read. This is not funny. I don't understand it. I'm not gonna direct this. And I went down to Waterstones, and I spent about an hour thumbing through plays, and I found The Real Inspector Hound by Tom Stoppard, which makes you laugh even when you read it on the page. And I directed that instead.
But Godot, when it's performed, though, it is funny, isn't it? Like, there are moments of it.
It can be.
All right.
There are moments of humour in Godot, most definitely.
I'm going to say, I think, right, and you can both tear this apart if you want, I think Waiting for Godot is the theatrical equivalent of The Emperor's New Clothes, okay? Actors want to have it on their CV so they can say they've done it.
Sure.
Critics want to be able to write about it so they can seem highbrow. And audiences want to be able to pretend they understood it, okay? No one knows what it's really about, because
I don't think I do.
Because
that's the point.
It's all about what the actors interpret of it. So, you know, for example, when you do get two aged Irish actors with gravitas, you see one thing, but if you see two wisecracking American comics who should be kind of like doing mother-in-law jokes, then you see another thing.
Yeah, because Steve Martin and Robin Williams did it, didn't they, in Broadway? And that would have been a completely different show. I would have loved
to have seen.
Yeah,
sounds good.
But apparently it was a bit of a like, Robin Williams just started going off on his own tangent and didn't perform Godot. Yeah. That would have been a bit weird, but so great to see. I mean, I love Steve Martin, and obviously Robin Williams, God rest his soul, was such an amazing performer. It would have been incredible. But I'd still choose Rik and Ade if I could see anyone perform it, because I feel Rik and Ade would have drawn the comedy out of this.
Oh, it's
and have you seen? We've all seen the rehearsal footage.
Yes, on YouTube.
On
there's
YouTube,
a 5-minute video, or it's a news segment that has a tiny bit of rehearsal footage and an interview with Rik and Ade.
That's right.
Going on about comedic double acts and the play in general, and you see little bits.
Yeah. If anyone hasn't watched it, please go and watch it, because it's a great little tip. But I think it was only uploaded a few years ago, but obviously it was recorded off the telly at the time. Thank you to whoever uploaded it and recorded that. It's great, because one thing I have found with when I've been researching around Waiting for Godot is that every clip that you do get to see of it is them having that back and forth of the moron, and then it culminates in critic, and that is the funny bit.
That's a good joke on the face of it.
Funny, you know, for in the theatre on the night, all that, you know, the critics in there, aren't they? And the way Rick plays it is great, and the way Steve Martin and Robin Williams play it's pretty.
Is there anything of Steve Martin and Robin Williams on?
A tiny bit that's really bad quality recording, so you can't really hear very well what they're saying back and forth, and it's terrible. But it gives you a bit of a flavour as to how it was staged.
There was a phrase that came up in this history of Godot that really resonated with me. That there are there are star parts and there are character parts. You know, you've heard of character actors and stuff. And basically, what this means is there are parts that are very much every single thing about the character is all written, and then there are ones that are a little bit blank, and it's made for the star to fill in all the blanks and have bits of their personality bleed through, and that's what the two characters Waiting for Godot are meant to be. Right. You're meant to bring in some people who fill in all these nuances and weird stuff. And Rik and Ade, it looks like the costume design on that looks great. They look brilliant as dirty tramps, but they both look cool, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you just compare it to any other performance and the little bits you're seeing, you can see the humour that they're injecting in it. There's a really nice bit when they're talking about the smell of each other. Like, I've got bad breath.
Yeah.
And he sounds very much like Eddie, my disgusting breath. And then Rick's doing like all this noise, which isn't in the script.
And he's using his hands a lot,
Yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
And you can just certainly see that.
And then Ade raises his foot and says, I've got stinky feet.
Yes.
And then Rick sort of does a thing of like merging the breath smell and the feet smell into
Together.
one.
Yeah,
And sort of with
that's, that's not in the script.
Yeah.
That's something that you can tell they and the director put in. And yeah, fuck me, that's when I kind of got it with first seeing their sketch. I'm like, oh, okay. But I bet that'd be really funny.
And it's how it's performed, isn't it? And
Yeah.
Les Blair, the director, he's got a little soundbite on that, and I'd love to get him on and interview him, because he says that they decided to sit down with it as if it was fresh and they'd interpret it the way they wanted to. And that is what I know what you're saying, Paul, about it being just one of these plays. It's a bit sort of everyone has to say they really enjoy it, and you come out of it thinking, what the fuck was that about?
Yeah.
You know, secretly, even though you've got to pretend like you thought it was the best thing you've ever seen. And there is a bit of that. When I was watching all the way through Act 1, I was a bit like, bloody hell, this is hard work. And then once I got to the end of Act 2, I was like, oh, okay. It started falling into place, and there are some really amazing speeches within it, aren't there?
There's
Like
stuff that's written
Pozzo's
for
speech in
them.
Act 2, though, is just incredible theatre.
he's-
Like I never
give
studied.
spoilers?
No. Well, I mean, you know, it's about life and death, isn't it? And all of the drudgery of human existence. And it is. I mean, I wouldn't say it. You know, I'm like, oh, it's changed my life watching it or anything. But I do want to. I'd love to see a performance of it now. It hasn't been performed in the West End since 2009 with Patrick Stewart and Sir Ian McKellen. And have you watched Ian McKellen talking about it?
No, I saw that video on YouTube, but I didn't watch it.
It's interesting. He's obviously saying a little bit the same, like, you know, every drama student has to watch it, and you know, we all have to take away what we take from it. But
this is my process.
yeah. What I do is I pretend. No, he isn't saying that. I pretend to be Vladimir. He is talking about Beckett's inspiration around writing the play, because of course you've got to know from where Beckett was coming when he sat and wrote this play, isn't it? He was writing it in the 40s. He'd lived through the Second World War. He'd fled the Gestapo. You know, when you add all those layers onto what happened with that, that's where the theatre of absurd was born out of. So, it does give it a gravitas that I don't think you can dismiss.
So it was written pre-nuclear fears or anything, pre-nuclear bombs and that kind of thing?
Well, it's written in the height of it, really, because the Second World War finished, of course, in 1945, and he was writing this between 49 and 53.
Right.
So the Cold War,
because I was watching it,
was literally bubbling away.
Yeah.
Like I know when you watch it, you know, you're sort of wondering what is the meaning, because everyone wants to be able to find the one defining meaning behind it. And I was looking at it thinking, okay, are they in purgatory? Maybe. Are they immortal and everyone else on Earth is dead? Has there been a nuclear war and actually they're only the last two people to be alive?
That was my first thought. That one's sort of a Mad Max type world.
It's desolate landscape.
Lucky going around being dragging along Pozzo as a kind of weird carriage slave combo type thing, like he's being led along in a really weird. So there's something very Python about that. Obviously, Python came after, but like, you know,
the image of the rope around the neck.
Yeah,
and
it makes me think of King Arthur walking without the horses and doing the camels and stuff.
The way he's shuffling.
Yeah,
Lucky.
That's maybe just in that performance. So the character of Lucky is entirely mute until he speaks and does a 5-minute monologue.
Yeah.
And he's told "think, pig," right?
Something like that. Yeah. It's around that time, and it's at the end of Act 1 when he goes on to this huge thing, and it's one of the parts that a lot of people bring out.
Was that Christopher Ryan playing
Christopher Ryan's part?
Right.
Yes. Now, from seeing the rehearsal footage, it looks like Rik and Ade were attacking him and trying to stop him from talking the whole way through him doing that speech, like getting him into a headlock, and he's still talking. That seems so them. Adding that much physical humour and visual gags.
Yeah. Oh. So in terms of like Waiting for Godot influencing Bottom or Richie and Eddie and so forth, we should probably make clear that people often say, oh, Rik and Ade were in Waiting for Godot 91, that's where Bottom came from, that was the genesis of it.
And
it wasn't
not
that.
correct.
No.
Yeah.
So we know that the chance, we think they did it at university when they were there in the 70s as 20th Century Coyote, and then yes, they were doing Waiting for Godot in 91, but by this point they had already recorded Bottom, and it was about to come out.
Pilots. Just the pilot?
No, Bottom was airing in 1990. What, we're doing the 30th anniversary series, right? Bottom was airing from September the 17th, and Godot launched in September 1991.
Yeah.
It was the same time.
Well, I can tell you who can confirm this. Edmondson.
Well, we're still waiting for him to turn up, aren't we?
He's calling soon, right?
Hang on, let me just look at my phone. Oh, sorry, it's on airplane mode. My mistake. He's probably already calling.
Yeah, so it's literally the same time, and also, I mean, Drop Dead Fred came out in theatres in October 1991.
Right.
So that was a big year for Rik.
It's a huge year for Rik, isn't it?
But so therefore, we can say that whilst their performances in it, they may have drawn things from Waiting for Godot, both in their previous performances in the 70s and from this run, but Waiting for Godot is not what Bottom came from, isn't it?
It came from Gordon Simpson, Steptoe and Son.
Yeah, they ripped that off instead.
I think the undeniable truth here is that Godot is about two characters who are literally floating in existence, aren't they? We don't know where they are, that's the whole point. We don't know where they're meant to be. And they begin and end each act in the exact same place, and they're never going to leave. And that is what every great sitcom has running through the heart of it. Two characters that can't leave each other, relying entirely on each other, might have a love-hate relationship, but they have to start and end at the status quo.
Yeah, because he invented the situational comedy in a
it's
kind
that
of way.
Relationship in drama, isn't it? And what works and two halves of a whole is what people talk about a lot about Estragon and Vladimir.
That's what Ade said in that interview.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yes,
and
I've summed out very well.
I've heard some people interpret it that Vladimir's the mind, he's got the hat on, he's got whatever, and then the boots, and they're talking about it is Estragon being the body, and he's talking about how ailing and in pain he is. And it's interesting, that idea of the two halves of the whole of the human condition.
In terms of the two characters in it, I did think there were one or two aspects of their characters that seem to be similar to the roles that Rik and Ade play as Richie and Eddie. In that, I'll just read you this tiny little bit from Wikipedia. It's about Vladimir and Estragon, and the way to remember which one is probably who here is E for Estragon, E for Eddie, V for Vladimir, and V for Richie.
Flicking the V sign.
Right? Okay, so Vladimir stands through most of the play, whereas Estragon sits down numerous times and even dozes off. Estragon is inert and Vladimir restless. Vladimir looks at the sky and muses on religious or philosophical matters. Estragon belongs to the stone, preoccupied with mundane things such as what he can get to eat and how to ease his physical aches and pains. He is direct, intuitive. He finds it hard to remember, but can recall certain things when prompted. That does. Richie's very sort of wave at planes, look out the window, isn't everything great? And Eddie's very much close the curtains. I'm trying to watch the video.
100%. So in that way, yeah, sure, there are influences there on Bottom from it, but it isn't like, oh, well, that's just definitely that Richie and Eddie are these two characters. It's not that. It's not that obvious, but there are elements of it, aren't there? For anybody to say, so therefore Waiting for Godot is what made Bottom, it's not true, is it? But then Steptoe and Son is quite similar, to be honest. That idea. So
he influenced, and so there's Waiting for Godot in Steptoe and Son for sure.
Yeah, there's that yin and yang, isn't there, of like two characters that need each other. And like you say, there's one that's full of energy and wants to get out and be better and do things, and then there's one that's pulling the other back. And there's some heartbreaking lines of dialogue in Godot, isn't there? It's like, I'm not going to quote it verbatim because I don't know it, but it's like, would we be better off parting? And they essentially say, we've had 50 years already together, what's the point? Don't they? And it's that idea of, we can't part now. What would be the point? We've been together this long.
To sound wanky for a second, the thematic similarities seem to be two guys who don't really have much to do, but just sort of looking away to fill the time, not really doing anything, waiting for something to happen in their lives, and who kind of don't particularly like each other, but don't have anyone else, so, they just exist with each other.
Yeah. So that's, not only is that Bottom, that is so many things. Now, a little bit of bad news. I got in touch with the agent, he's messaged me on WhatsApp, and I'm afraid Adrian can't make it today, but he will make it tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
So I think maybe we just take a break now, and then we will resume filming tomorrow. He's just come back. Yes, sir. with all the questions, no sir, yes sir, back and forth. But he'll definitely be here tomorrow.
Okay.
So
should we have a quick word from our sponsor and then come back?
Sponsor, and then we'll come back. We'll be filming it the next day, but we just come back in 2 minutes. Do you feel despair about the existential nature of life and the meaningless of existence? Well, fear not. There's a book about boredom coming out. That's going to really pass the time. The time would have passed anyway, but not as rapidly if you buy this and read this.
When's it coming out?
Don't know.
Oh.
Welcome back. It's a fresh new day where things are going to be different. Edmondson will be here today. He's assured us. So let's get on with the second half of the podcast. Is everyone all right today?
Yeah, good. It feels like it's been a while because there's some leaves on the tree now.
What tree? What are you talking about?
There are 4 or 5 leaves on that tree right behind us that you're going to hang yourself from later.
Oh, there's some nice lines in Godot about the tree with hanging themselves.
Yeah.
And it's so bottom. It's very much. It's like, oh, we can hang ourselves. And then we'll get an erection. Oh, an erection. And it's like, yes. And everything that follows it. So like, what? Someone's going to come and fuck you because you've hung yourself. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's part of the nonsensical thing, isn't it? But is that a thing that was a myth that was in common understanding then, that if you were hung, you'd get an erection? Is that?
Oh, the blood going like.
Yeah.
Is it a myth or is it true?
I've never been in the presence of anyone who has been hanged.
The death stalk. I've heard that.
I've heard it.
And you shit yourself as well. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's the fight and flight thing. Your body, much like when you shit yourself from fear. I suppose it probably is fear. At least you're making your body is thinking, oh God, make myself lighter so I can get away.
I think it is actually once they're dead, though, isn't it? That you would then all the muscles relax and it's horrible.
And the fingers and hair grow. No, they don't. The body shrinks. That's a common myth.
But yeah, to bring it back to a previous one that we did, base needs is something that is definitely touched upon, isn't it, in Godot? In the same way that obviously we're looking for comparisons with Richie and Eddie. I think Vladimir goes off to have a wee. A few times
off the edge of the world, sort of. It looks like in the version that's on YouTube. It's quite surreal. It makes me think of Tyrion pissing off the edge of the wall in Game of Thrones. Let's talk about some of the things in Waiting for Godot that are very bottom. Now they discuss about having a bit of a fight and a bit of an insult thing just to pass the time. That's very, very, very bottom.
Yeah.
It's not a particularly violent play, or at least it's not in the writing stuff. It can be interpreted. There is a bit where Lucky kicks Estragon in the shin in the film. I don't know if it's written as that he kicks him in the shin. He certainly hits him, and then he gets some sort of attack back and forth. So there's certainly little bits of violence, and I'm sure the Rik and Ade version, they'd have really played into that side of things. Why isn't it on fucking video? I want it so much.
I thought there were elements of the sort of confused bickering that you see between Rich and Eddie that I was seeing in Waiting for Godot, where one of them would sort of say something and the other one wouldn't really get it, but it would provoke or prolong an argument between the two of them,
But why? Why? All this stuff. Like, well, why do you mean this? Because this is the way it is, and I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But why?
There were certain lines that I thought that feels like that could have come out of bottom, and it might be partly from the way it was performed, but even things like, how's your foot? Reply, swelling visibly. That felt like that could be like, how's he looking? Fatter, you know?
Yeah, that's where those moments of humour are coming out. And obviously it's not like rip-roariously hilarious and you're rolling on the floor clutching your sides kind of humour, but like it's absolutely there in the double act that comes out of Estragon and Vladimir's relationship. And there's those moments where in Act 2 where it's like, should we hug? Isn't there? There's kind of like there's like a love there between them, but then it doesn't happen, and it's all
it
very
feels like they're meant to hug. So I guess society would say we should hug now. Sure, I don't really want to.
Yeah, and then it's like, are you happy? Are we happy? Those kind of things.
Now we've been happy. What do we do now?
Yeah.
There was a bit of sort of prolonged insults that reminded me of the vagabond, usurer.
Yeah. 100%. I was going to say that speech where it leads up to critic.
That's the one.
Absolutely is like a Richie and it's dickhead, isn't it? That they have in that, but there's a third party in that one. But yeah, like the insults thrown back and forth between Richie and Eddie. It's just a little gem within Waiting for Godot, isn't it? Yeah. But again, like
it's a stand-up moment, I think, and that I would like any critic in the audience being on the fence, then like, Oh, fuck them then.
They're,
no stars.
I know.
Interesting. The critics for Rik and Ade weren't very, very flattering
No one
at
really
all,
liked
were
it,
they?
did they? No.
Idiots! You don't know what it's fucking about. They're fucking. They think, oh, where's the melancholy and the angst? They're like, it's meant to be funny as well.
That is
There's
what's
humour's very
interesting,
important in
isn't it? That obviously the interpretation of the play and what you might go into it expecting. And then what obviously Rik and Ade drew out of it was the comedic side. You know, obviously if you were going into it just wanting all the pain and the tears and not the laughter, they probably went in with the preconception as well of like, oh, these are these two TV comedians and they're going to butcher this wonderful, wonderful existential play, you know. And I wish that I could have seen it because I reckon Rik and Ade would have treated it with the respect that it deserved. I don't think that they would have in any way made it like they don't care about the performances or anything.
Just
they would have brought
the
it to life.
moments in those words because there's some fucking gems in there that can be just thrown away or put real good comedic emphasis on. And
yeah.
Can we talk quickly about all the characters very briefly? We probably should have gone about this yesterday, but all of the characters. There's Vladimir and Estragon, who are two tramps. But that is not in the script at all. It's never mentioned in the pages that they are two tramps.
Yeah.
And apparently, it was something that the director come up with.
Is it right that it's sort of inferred that they look a bit sort of down at heel, like their clothes are a bit shabby? The only thing that's specified is that they wear bowler hats. But
There's a bit when they're all changing hats and stuff that would be in the script, I guess.
There's talk of the boots being too tight, aren't there, on Estragon?
Yeah, there's boots, but
it's almost as if they're not his though, you know, like as if he's acquired them, and then there's a moment where he swaps boots, right?
Well, no, sorry.
They actually are his own boots, but he thinks they're someone else's boots.
Right, okay.
But in terms of the actual them dressing as tramps, I think the way that came about was a bit like in the same way that the first time someone performed Sherlock Holmes to a mass audience, they dressed in a certain way. When they first put Waiting for Godot on, they dressed them as tramps, and then people saw that and they just thought,
that's what they look
right,
like.
this is what they look like from now on.
Something like that, yeah. Apparently Beckett confirms as well. Oh, I didn't write them as tramps, but yes, they're tramps. Yeah. I don't know if maybe he had a conversation with the director and it was mentioned, and then he forgot he told him that, and it just was always in the director's mind.
But it's that interpretation of like, what else are they going to be if they've clearly got this rootless existence and they're just living in the open. Yeah. They don't appear to have a roof over their head.
It makes sense, doesn't it? It certainly fits.
You can see why it got taken out of the script. You know, it wasn't there in the script, but you can see why it was interpreted that way.
Maybe Beckett had dementia.
We've got
maybe that's why he wrote this pile of dog shit.
We've got two other characters that turn up called Pozzo, who is like a kind of tradesman, regal, posh, higher status type.
Fat bastard.
And his servant slave called Lucky, who is mute for most of it, apart from his one long monologue.
And he is tethered to Pozzo with a rope. If anyone hasn't watched it, you know, he's tethered by his neck by a very long rope. And Pozzo's
they wanted a noose earlier as well, so that coming up, like, oh, maybe we can get that. They fight over some chicken bones. It's quite odd and surreal. And there's also a little boy that turns up at the end of both acts, with mostly just saying yes sir, no sir, yes sir.
But with a message that Godot is on the way.
Played by, in the Rik and Ade show, Dean Gaffney. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Would have been great. How old would he have been then in 91?
He'd had to be like 8 or 9 maybe a little bit older, but looking that sort of age. He'd been before EastEnders.
I think.
Definitely.
I think he's 42 now, and so this was in what, 91?
Yeah.
So he would have been like 13.
Okay. There you go.
There you are. So while you figure things out, maths.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. Hopefully we might be able to get Dean on the podcast to talk about his memories of working with Rik and Ade in that, because that would be, imagine that at 13, fantastic part.
But he doesn't know of them for anything other than Young Ones, and maybe he wouldn't even have watched it at that sort of age.
Yeah, because Bottom was only just airing, you know, so really, I'd love to chat to him about what he remembers from Rik and Ade's performances as well. But yeah, Pozzo, I've read, obviously, I mean, when I was watching it, I was thinking, okay, so he's capitalism, but he's also fascism, he represents communism, he represents all of the horrible kind of like structures in the human existence that keep us in our little boxes, doesn't he?
Does he? I don't know. Does he?
That is what a lot of people have interpreted it as, yeah. I mean, I watched it thinking that, he's capitalism, and then when I did a little bit of background reading, I was like, oh, okay, he's also a lot of horrible, shitty things that keep the human...
He's capitalism and fascism and communism.
That's what a lot of people put onto... that. It's open to interpretation, isn't it? But he's the idea of who he is in the play, you know, he represents... And then Lucky is obviously representing the slave and the servant and the working man.
Now, to get Poncy about it as well. He's the only character who changes in a certain way, because when you see him the second time, his status has fallen and he's now blind and subservient with Lucky to get him around. So, which shows that time is passing and there is a deadline, things are declining, so that it won't actually keep going on forever and ever and ever.
Which you also see with the growing of leaves on the tree as well. So you know that time is passing. It's not just like
they're not in limbo.
They're not in not in the phantom zone like General Zod.
Yeah,
sure.
But so from what I took from it, obviously it's all open to interpretation. I would say that the blinding of Pozzo is meant to be post-war. So when Beckett was writing this, obviously he'd lived through the Second World War, and the idea being that it's almost like pre and post Second World War is what I would say between the two acts. I mean, I don't know if I'm right, but the idea of leaves growing on the tree, it's hope, all that kind of thing is what I would interpret from what's happened between Act 1 and Act 2. The fact that Vladimir and Estragon aren't sure what's happened
seems to be the day
and
after,
they don't know how much time has gone by. It makes me think that they're two people that have essentially died in the war.
It's certainly something.
You could interpret it that way. And they're stuck in a nether region between death and life, and they're waiting for. And I think they are waiting for is death. I think Godot is it could be God, but I think it's death that they're waiting for, and that's all that's going to give meaning to their life.
So
God's got a white beard. That's a fucking God reference for sure.
Do you think that they have died and are waiting to ascend to somewhere like heaven or hell, or are they on the ground in their last death throes, taking their last breath?
This is what's interesting, is that you can interpret it whatever way you want. I would say that they're...
If only Beckett had told us.
I would say they represent lost souls. Right. And whether that's purgatory, if you've got that religious background.
Our souls.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? Like, I don't think it's a load of shit. I think it's a really, really interesting play.
I think it presents itself.
It's definitely going to invite a lot of hyperbolic philosophical talk and all of that, but that is what drama should do in many ways. You're meant to go in and come out thinking about what you've just seen.
I would like to quote the critic Vivian Mercier, who described Waiting for Godot as a play which has achieved a theoretical impossibility, a play in which nothing happens, yet keeps audiences glued to their seats. What's more, since the second act is a subtly different reprise of the first, he has written a play in which nothing happens twice. Was Vivian literally glued to their fucking seat? Is that what happened? Did someone put fucking glue on your seat, Vivian?
Yeah, Vivian.
Yeah, Vivian!
Well, does he mean glued to his seat? Does he mean on the edge of their seat? Or does he mean, like, glued to your...
Yes,
you can't leave.
You can't get up and leave. Yeah.
Well, a bit like
the
Estragon.
expression, like, you'll be glued to your seat, but you'll only need the edge of it.
Because you're usually glued to your screen, aren't you? Not your seat.
It's all kind of different.
No, glued to your seat is a thing. I mean, pre-screens, people would sit on seats in theatres.
You wouldn't say glued to the stage, would you? That sounds like you've...
But is the inference glued to your seat that you're really enjoying it?
Yeah.
That you've not left.
Right, because, I mean, I've only heard of it for glued to the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you're really enjoying it.
It's the same thing.
But glued to your seat feels a bit more kind of like
you're being forced to watch it.
Yeah, I don't know. And then you're on the edge of your seat means that you're really
yeah.
enjoying it. You know, you're captivated with what you're watching. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, I mean, what you obviously aren't happy with.
Look,
with the idea that
there were bits of it. So I enjoyed things like the absurdist stupidity that I saw bits of that I saw in Rik and Ade. So, for example, the whole, someone swapped these boots over, my boots were too tight, these ones are too tight. That felt a bit like Eddie being like, look, I've got a duck. Well, what use is a duck? Well, it floats in the bath. Those bits feel nice. It's a lot of kind of like, hey, aren't we clever and wanky? We're just going to sort of stand around.
That's how I felt when I first came across this, for sure. Yeah, it certainly can give you a knee-jerk reaction of like, why is there no fucking arc here? Why is there no plot? You're just kind of taught to expect an ending, the way things build, and it just doesn't. And that's the point of it, I guess. Yeah. It's all middle. It's a kind of like the anti-jokes, anti-humour, those sort of things. It's surreal,
Yeah, the theatre of the absurd is basically what Beckett was part of. He invented, and nothing happens, but that is actually the point, creating action out of inaction.
Life doesn't really have a huge arc, but you are doing a story. You're not doing a documentary on just...
But is theatre there to make you think? Is it there to make you come away thinking about what you've just seen? I would say yeah.
Sometimes.
And yeah, I would come away from this thinking I've wasted so much money on the tickets to this.
Would you? Like, genuinely?
No,
you think
It depends who's in it.
Yeah.
The play has so many different ways of doing it. I can see a very joyless, very serious version of this that would be fucking torture that I'd only watch if I was glued to my seat. But yeah, just the snippet that we see of Rik and Ade doing it, you can see like, oh, all right, they've managed to make this thing that could be very much hard work fucking funny.
Yeah, who would you love to see in it? I would love to see Steve Pemberton and Rhys Shearsmith in this.
Oh yeah.
I would. I mean, did you see them in art?
I did see them in
Gentlemen
art.
Did art. Oh, fantastic! Best night at the theatre I've ever had.
I'd love to see a production with Jim Davidson and Lee Hurst.
Would you?
Because they say there isn't enough right-wing comedy anymore.
You can't say anything anymore. I'd also love to see. I think Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon would do it justice as well.
That's a very good pairing, actually. Yeah,
I've been sat there thinking about it. I mean, other than Rik and Ade, obviously, we could go back in time. Like, who would be a great pairing?
Do you think Mitchell and Webb would do a good?
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
What about if you could see two women playing the role, like French and Saunders, for example?
Yeah, sure.
I think that could work. There's been an all-female production, hasn't there? And it was a very controversial thing at the time. I was reading that people said, you can't do that. Yeah, at the time it was because obviously the characters are male. They're not female.
I guess. Can't hang yourself. Why? You'll get a wet fanny. What are you going to say? Yeah, that bit, I suppose. Or are they playing men?
I'm not sure, but I presume it was women playing women, but I didn't see that production. But yeah, it would be interesting to see a double act. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it, to just conjure that up and think, oh, they do a fantastic job. Yeah, Frances Saunders might be really, really great.
I think
in those roles.
It's like, who do you think is going to win the big football game? Man United. Yeah, I can tell I'm a big football fan. But yeah, Jennifer Saunders and French, 100%. 100% would be a really good one.
So who would be Potso and Nucky though?
Or Kathy Burke could be one of them.
Yeah.
She's always quite good. Kathy Burke and Helen Lederer. There you go.
There you go.
So to link Waiting for Godot to Bottom a bit, I'm thinking about the costumes that they wear. I know we've said that they look sort of threadbare and worn, but they're not tramps. Do you think that Spudgun and Hedgehog are the characters from Waiting for Godot? Because Richie and Eddie, as we discussed before when we talk about the costumes...
I certainly think there's something to that.
Richie and Eddie, as we've discussed before when we talk about the costumes, are quite smart and well turned out. But Spudgun and Hedgehog have the look of people who maybe were dressed smart 10 years ago, but they haven't changed their clothes since.
They don't own any other clothing.
Spudgun was ever smart.
Right, well,
but Christopher Ryan's Hedgehog, yes, and of course he played Lucky as well.
Yeah. But at least that their clothes were new when they had them.
Like
even
every single clothes in the world.
The point being that that's the only outfit that they've owned and could afford in the last 10, 20 years. Because as you say, Spudgun isn't dressed smartly, is he? But when he had that new, it would have been new, and he's just lived in it.
Are Spudgun and Hedgehog spending their days in their house on Chief Mangasuta Buta Lazy Cul-de-sac waiting for Eddie?
Yeah,
they don't live together though,
don't they?
Well, one's married with kids.
Yeah,
and the other one you see on his own when he goes around for trick or treating. But you would assume they live together until those details are fleshed out.
Even though Spudgun answers the door on his own, for some reason I just assume Dave Hedgehog lives upstairs.
Yeah,
no, I've always thought he lives with his mum, right? Spudgun, and then Hedgehog's got the wife he can never remember the name of.
Right, so I want to go through specific moments that are in Waiting for Godot, and specific moments that are in Bottom, and how they could be in either version of it themselves, if you get what I mean.
Yep.
There's quite a few times in Waiting for Godot where they haggle over small bits of money. Like, help, how much? £1? No. £2? All right. And the whole thing with 20p, all this sort of stuff. That's I don't know where that originated from, but it's something that really shows the character, doesn't it? It shows how desperate they are.
It shows how poor they are. It also shows how petty they are. Like, a small amount of money really means a lot to them, but also they will argue the toss for it. They will argue the toss over it for eternity. Yeah,
that's a real loaded bit of dialogue, isn't it? So much backstory from that. There's a bit that's very, very upbrow and high society, where right at the end of Waiting for Godot, one of the characters' pants have fallen down.
Yes.
It's like, pull your pants up.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, come on.
He takes the rope off in order to try and see if it's strong enough to hang themselves.
His belt, you mean? Yeah.
But it's a bit of rope, isn't it? And it breaks in half.
Yeah, okay.
I think
but it's not fully, I suppose it could be leather or rope. But yeah,
I
he
think
takes it
because
off,
they're tramps, it's essentially just a bit of
Yeah, all right,
string,
fair
isn't
enough.
it? Yeah.
But yeah, his trousers falling down are a
Yeah.
little bit of slapstick there for us, isn't it?
waiting for someone to show up or something to happen and passing the time. Yeah. Now, how many times does that happen in Bottom?
I mean, a lot of their days, a lot of their stories are just them sitting around waiting. Then something turns up and they sort of embark upon it. But they don't really have any aim or direction in their lives, do they? They wait for things to happen and then things do happen. So yeah, there's a similarity there.
I don't know, that's quite a broad term, and I may be grasping at straws here to bring that into Waiting for Godot. That's what this episode's about.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, like, we're avoiding saying things like, you know what, there's two white males, and that kind of thing.
They both have legs, apart from the bit when he gets his legs cut
absolutely.
off.
Like the idea that you've got a rootless existence and you're just waiting for something to happen is definitely a parallel in Bottom. Like, things happen to Richie and Eddie. They don't really make it happen for themselves. Like, it's what happens to them, isn't it?
Yeah, they're not very driven.
Yeah.
They're very opportunist. So I've written down some moments here. We can bring them up. In Accident, with the birthday party, waiting for the birthday party. There's something maybe a little bit there. It kind of comes in later, but that is the introduction of Spudgun and Hedgehog, which does kind of feel like it's the first time we've seen two others, when it's like it's been in a two-hander, and then suddenly, there's these other two who are very weird.
Well, also, actually, you're right there in that Richie, who convinces himself of things in his head, is waiting for a party of 4,000 people to turn up and genuinely expects it, and then is surprised when it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That's the same sort of possible self-delusion that the characters in Waiting for Godot have.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've just got another update from the agent here, saying that he will get back to us, but a little bit later. So sorry to interrupt there. Carry on.
Okay, we'll just wait. It's fine.
Yes. Other things I've written down in culture, like the whole episode really is them passing the time. What to do.
Yeah, it's the boredom, isn't it? And
Yes.
how you fill that time.
At the beginning of Sup,
Yeah.
they're very much passing the time
Absolutely.
in a dreary existence.
It's a Sunday, what do you do, and again, like, Richie's thinking, we should be out there playing cricket, and he's full of the energy, and like you said earlier, Paul, Eddie sat there on the couch saying, close the curtains and trying to watch the videos,
Yeah.
They're the one that I brought up all this Godot for back in the day, a couple of years ago now, South. I think like the whole bloody episode, it's very, they're by a tree, they're outside, they're waiting around, they're killing time. It's just throughout the whole thing, like write it all down.
They're in an absolute fucking shithole.
And Hole
Yeah.
is another one that's probably as much like it, maybe more so. It's just those two.
I would say
together.
Hole is definitely, like, if you were going to have one particular episode that you compare. I mean, obviously the visuals in South is there, but the idea that they've got nothing else to do and nothing else to occupy themselves with, they're trapped entirely. Like, that's Hole, isn't it? Like, the top of the Ferris wheel is a bit of a weird curveball, isn't it? But and they're waiting to be rescued, and no one ever will.
Yeah.
Because in fact they've been put up there on purpose. Because everyone thinks they're, well, Richie certainly is a dickhead. Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
Break. It's the other one.
Waiting
They're
for the holiday.
That's one that's very much locked in, and they're not waiting indefinitely. They're waiting one evening, but the time is passing quite slowly for us anyway. So again, grasping at straws.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's cherry picking, isn't it? Because you could say, well, it smells. They actively buy the pheromone spray and they're going out to pull birds, and they're not just waiting for things to happen in that episode.
Find the advert for it, like, just falls in their lap, isn't it? So they are reactionary again.
They've been out trying to chat up birds, haven't they?
work,
And they get home and they've been they haven't had success. So it's how are we going to make it work? And then same with Digger. Actually, I think with Richie and Eddie, their purpose is trying to get their end away, isn't it? Like, that is what we've gone over time and again. Whereas in Waiting for Godot, there isn't really any mention of them ever having that, apart from, well, let's hang ourselves and then at least we can have an erection. Like that. In that way, it's not similar, is it? Because Rik and Ade have obviously created more fleshed out characters than Estragon and Vladimir.
I'll tell you where I think there is a big difference as well, is that Richie and Eddie, it's in the writing, Richie and Eddie speak like people, and the characters in Waiting for Godot speak like a theatrical production of something. So how, like,
very poetic and
it's the way it's so, like, Steve Coogan talked about this on stage once. He said, if you turn on like a radio play on the radio, you can tell in about 2 seconds that it's a radio play rather than normal people talking, because they don't talk like normal people. Richie and Eddie talk like you or I talk, or how people in their homes talk, whereas the people in this will say things like, we must celebrate this, but how? And that's not someone answering someone. That's the same character. No one in real life goes, you might say we must celebrate this, but no one would then go, but how? That's dramatic writing.
Pause afterwards, yeah. But then again, we have said in the past that Rik and Ade wrote Bottom as if it was a play, and there are moments of poetry and some of, but the convincing thing is how they sell it. It does feel like Rik and Ade are very, very real people, and they're delivering their lines almost effortlessly, and it's as if it's all coming out, and that's just because they're fantastic actors. But you're absolutely right. The staging of Waiting for Godot is completely different to how Rik and Ade are playing Richie and Eddie.
Show. You see that bit? Where it's like, you know, talking about the boots, show, instead of show me, show.
Right.
Now that, what the fuck, why are you saying it that way? But yeah, seeing Richie, show, the way he pronounces stuff, that's not funny on the page, and it's fucking funny. Again, like, it's such a dramatically different part depending on the actors, and again, this is what to me, it's like it suddenly made sense why people were going on about this when I just saw that little snippet. If anyone has any leads on even an audio recording bootleg of this, we'll send you a $5.
We'll say no more about it. But you're right, the physicality of Rik and Ade's performance, like we've talked about it in our physical comedy episodes, you know, what you bring to a character and your physicality can say things that the audience weren't even aware that they're taking from you. And we've talked about it, haven't we, like in the physical comedy episode, about how literally how you present yourself on stage can tell you about your character.
And that is down to the actor's interpretation of it and the direction they get from the director. So if Samuel Beckett had been a bit clearer in his stage directions, and also just when he told people and talked to them, rather than just shrugging his shoulders and going, I don't know, who do you think I am, the writer? Oh wait, I am the writer.
There's that history of Beckett, like one of the actors sits down with him afterwards and says, well, this is what I think of this because of that. There's a line here that means this. The religious element, very clear because of this, and this. It's like, well, if that's what it meant to you, then that's what it meant to you. So, fuck you, Beckett.
I mean, it absolutely is pretentious, isn't it? Like, you can't say anything other than that. Like, to be like, you interpret it the way you do, darling, and that's right. You know,
do you know what it's about, Beckett? Or are you just a fucking...
Look, is this just a big fucking practical joke? Right?
It's a Nick Block test.
It's interesting, though, that apparently Beckett saw it as a millstone around his neck eventually, Godot, because people made such a huge deal of it, and then anything he did afterwards was always... And anything anyone did afterwards was compared to it. Like we're all doing now with Bottom.
All he had to do in the end to get rid of that millstone was go, look, okay, the Emperor is not wearing anything. Okay, I admit it. They're stark bollock fucking naked.
Two other small grasping at straws references that I've seen in Bottom as well.
How small Richie's penis is, and no,
that bit's
small grasping at straws. Sorry, I don't know the way you said that. It made me think of grasping a tiny little penis.
Little penis straws and hen nights. Carnival, the end. That's a year of them doing the video. Just something that maybe seemed like time's passing, but the same thing's happening. And in Bottom Live 2, the Queen's coming round. Wait for the Queen.
Yeah, you're right. They're always sort of... She's always on the cusp of appearing, isn't she? Yeah,
sure. Any other things stood out for you two with Bottom or Beckett?
Only really the lines I mentioned earlier. You know, there's a few like bits where I thought, that feels a bit, could be Rik and Ade, but I think it may have been partly down to the way they were performed. You know, half of it's down to the performance of the actors, which I think is why in this, I don't think many people would go and see this show if there was two unknowns in it. That's why
star parts versus character parts.
It requires a Rik and Ade or a Ethan Hawke and a John Leguizamo or a Steve Martin and a Robin Williams. If it was just the local Andram Society was doing it, you go, fuck that. It's boring as fuck and it doesn't make sense, so I at least want to see famous people doing it.
It can be boring, sure, but so can anything.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't seen any versions with anyone unknown in it. Although the one I've watched on YouTube, I can't say I know those actors that were in it, the Irish actors in it.
So one of them I recognised from an episode of Game of Thrones. Right. He's a guy who he's in one episode and he's like found slumped on the ground. He's been beaten. You
see what I mean? Like their characters isn't why I thought that the delivery of their lines was any good or any worse. It would elevate it to see a personality in the role.
For all the negativity I am throwing at it, I would still love to have seen the Rik and Ade performance of it. And if anyone does have a tape of it, please let us know and we will pay you for it. Like, I'd still love to see it, and it might give me a new appreciation of the show.
I think it definitely would. Right, what other things have you noticed that Waiting for Godot has gone on to inspire? Huge one for me, absolute colossal huge one that I'm surprised no one's mentioned yet, With Now and I. It's fucking everywhere in it.
Well,
it's about nothing happening, very dreary, scruffily well-dressed people.
Yeah.
Danny coming round as well kind of reminds me of Potso in a weird sort of way. I mean, again, grasping at the straws, him taking off his glasses and he's got like bloodshot eyes, it's like he's blind. I mean, it might be a tiny little reference to it.
With Now and Ade is my favourite film, so I slightly bristle at this because of how much of a disliking position I've taken against Waiting for Godot. I can see what you mean, though. I can see those certain kind of similarities.
Well, this is it. They're not tramps, are they? But they're literally alcohol.
Shoe back together and stuff.
It's that thing of waiting for the pubs to open, all of that kind of thing. Like, yeah, there's definite parallels there. I mean, it's influenced a lot of things, like certainly episodes of things. There's a Simpsons episode, isn't there?
There's a really nice sketch in Sesame Street where there's theatre masterclass or something. The Cookie Monster's narrating it like in an armchair theatre type way, and then you'd see excerpts from the play Waiting for Elmo.
And is Elmo the character that lives in the dustbin?
No, that's Oscar the Grouch. Elmo is the Tickle Me Elmo, red, happy, loves everyone. But he's not in that because they're waiting for Elmo. So it's Grover and I don't know.
What's the play that has people in dustbins?
Oh, that's Endgame?
Endgame.
Or Agamemnon?
No, it's Endgame. And is that by Beckett as well?
I think it is.
He can fuck right off, can't he?
There's references to it in The Simpsons. I don't know if anyone's watched the final episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia in Series 14. That's called Waiting for Big Mo.
Okay.
And that's entirely taking place in a laser quest, and they're waiting for Big Mo to show up.
Waiting for Guffman, the film by Christopher Guest about them putting on an Amdram performance and then waiting for a very high-end theatre reviewer called Guffman to turn up. There's certainly bits
so basically
of that.
put waiting for
the bus when you do that.
I've got one. So in that highbrow film Supergirl, that was made in the early 80s to try and capitalise on the success of Superman, Peter O'Toole is in it, and his character is in the Phantom Zone, and he's just sort of there in this wasteland on his own, and Supergirl goes and visits him. And just through the course of this conversation here, it made me think of that scene in Supergirl. So I think Supergirl was partly influenced by Waiting for Godot.
About Mad Max and just wandering around that wasteland sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe.
A good one. About the episode Marooned, Red Dwarf, when they're just waiting to be rescued and it's in a desperate...
I mean, it's a two-hander, isn't it? And it I think it's a bit of a stretch to say it's Waiting for Godot necessarily that has influenced that one. I think it's just them wanting to do Rimmer and Lister in a room and they're trapped and they're waiting to be rescued.
How did he smell the wood?
But Marooned is absolutely one of the best episodes of Red Dwarf.
How did he use the microphone as well?
There's so many times when they fuck up and they like give him hard light form so we can bloody do this properly.
Finally, we don't have to do workarounds to have him touching things.
And there's one more film I want to mention that's I came to while I was in uni doing some film study and stuff, and it was brought up to me because of the comparisons to Withnail and I. It's a film called Adam and Paul.
Okay, I've never heard of it.
No, it's an Irish film. It's about two crackheads. Huh? No, not crackheads.
Is it a comedy?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's about two heroin addicts that wake up in the park, having spent the night on a bender, and them searching the whole day for some heroin, trying to get fix, and them going around Dublin, I believe it is, just looking for drugs.
Did they overdose the night before and they're dead?
Well, they know because to spoil the ending, one of them overdoses at the end.
Ah, okay.
So no.
Okay.
But. There's a lot. If you like Withnail and I think you should check that out. Okay. It's an Irish film. There's not really any name actors in it that I'm aware of, but it's very melancholy and tragic. But there's a lot of. I saw someone has written the comparisons of Waiting for Godot and Adam and Paul, and made me think, fucking hell, of course Withnail and I as well.
I'll check it out. That's always a big claim that annoys me when I see it on film posters. Things like the spiritual successor to Withnail and I. I think you're really fucking bigging yourself up there. So you need to be something special.
There's an Edward Furlong drama set in prison that says something like the best prison drama since Shawshank Redemption. Like, fuck off.
Really?
What a bold statement. It's set in a prison. There you go.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, apparently doing performances of Waiting for Godot has been done in quite a few prisons by prisoners, and that obviously just adds an extra kind of gravitas to the entire thing, because the idea of being completely and utterly trapped and you've got nowhere to go and completely aimless in life, of course, speaks to many people who were trapped in prison, and in many ways I feel like you felt that way in the audience, Paul, when you're watching Godot, no?
Yeah, and then but then when a character
glued to your seat, like, fuck it, I need to leave, I can't stand another moment.
When a character came on with a noose already around their neck, I was thinking, you lucky bastard.
There's a fantastic Alexis Sale sketch from his sketch show back in the 80s, 90s.
Yeah, I've been waiting for you to bring this up because it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't watched it, I'd recommend.
The premise is he's rushing to get somewhere. He's in a car and he gets pulled over. But it's like, where are you going to in such a hurry? Who are you? And I have your details. Like, oh, sorry, my name's Godot. I'm on the way to see some people. I'm running late. Just seeing like what Godot's actually up to.
It's a lovely little flip, isn't it? And then weirdly it's James Dreyfus, isn't it, who's in the sketch on stage, like when he turns up. I can't remember the name of the other actor.
Let's not give away the actual ending.
I won't give the full ending, but yeah, it's a fun little sketch.
It ends with one of them overdosing.
I mean, it's inspired a lot of little things, hasn't it? I mean, that's the whole point of the theatre of the absurd, is that it was a movement that kind of got born out of the post-war era.
Everything's grim. Let's have a real discussion about the meaningless existence of life.
Exactly, which I think if you've lived through the war... I mean, I studied history at uni, so I think the idea of where Beckett was getting that inspiration from, for me, makes me feel more interested in the narrative. Ian McKellen's interview, he says that essentially Beckett worked for the French resistance during the Second World War.
Oh, was he trying to bore the Germans to death?
Well, he said himself that he was a few nights or a few weeks was in charge of being at an outpost, and all he was doing was waiting for a message.
Okay.
And the message was, if it doesn't come today, it will come tomorrow. So wait, you just got to wait there. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, of course, that would be one of the inspirations for Godot, and the torture and the boredom of just waiting.
Well, I'm sorry to change the subject, but I've just got a message from Mr. Emerson's agent again, and I'm so sorry, but he's not available today, but he will be in touch tomorrow.
Okay, well, I'm going to try and get an erection.
Yeah, I think we'll either commit suicide or we'll finish this podcast rather than wait any longer. What do you reckon?
My summation for Waiting for Godot would be this. If you want to watch it, if you can get hold of a copy of Rik and Ade performing it in 1991, watch that and also send us a copy. But if you can't, just pop Withnail and I on. It's a far superior film.
Well, yeah, it's not.
I've just watched Bottom as well because it's far superior and much funnier, I think. I'm being told that Krusty Gets Cancelled is the episode in which the puppet Gabbo is coming.
Oh,
okay. In The Simpsons.
Right. It does turn up. And it's definitely
there you go.
So
but
Gabbo, who's Gabbo?
I think they're waiting for him though, wasn't they? So there's little references and things, what I'm saying, in modern kind of culture, and I mean, The Simpsons have done everything, haven't they?
They did everything to the point that they predicted everything that's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
And they did an episode of South Park called The Simpsons Did It.
Did they really?
If you've not seen that, it's really good.
I love that South Park. Simpsons Did It. Yeah. Brilliant. But what do you think the meaning of human existence is? Can we wrap up with that? Or?
42.
Yeah, very good.
Very good.
Well, there's the telly.
There is.
Well, there was.
Well, I mean, Beckett and people have gone on to say essentially that life is meaningless, and the meaning that we put into it is what life actually is all about, giving us things to do to pass the time, violence, sexual gratification, base needs, the costumes, episodes of Bottom, interviews with Robert Llewellyn.
So you trying to say the meaning of existence is this podcast?
It's part of the meaning of existence.
For all of us three at the moment. Talking Bottom, is it?
Happiness, wisdom, freedom, opportunity and love, right? Isn't that what Rik said on stage?
Yeah. That's correct, yeah.
Join us next week where we go over the favourites of you, the fans of Bottom and of this podcast. Maybe you're a fan of both. Please get in touch with us at Talking Bottom on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. You'll also send us an electronic mail at 11mafekinparade@gmail.com, and please go over it in as much detail as you can of what bits of Bottom that you particularly liked.
I think we've done a poll, haven't we, across Twitter and Facebook and everything.
We have. We've
fan favourite moment and episode and series and line.
We've done a very general, informal poll across social media. Yes, we've asked people for their favourite episode, their favourite moment, their favourite line, and their favourite character. So we'll be discussing what people...
That isn't Richie and Ade.
That isn't Richie and Ade. So we'll be discussing what people say their favourites are next week, and we'll talk about what
our own.
And we'll talk about what ours are as well.
Well, that's it. Have we not already done that? Oh, well, this is, I guess...
I think throughout the entire first, second and third series we were doing that, but we're going to do a little summation of it, because it will be the end of this 30th anniversary series, won't it, next time?
It will be. That'll be it. Apart from the interviews that we continue to drip feed out, because we got more of them than we had themed episodes.
While we're researching the book that we're writing, if anyone has already pledged, thank you very much.
If you haven't...
Thank you very much, lovely. If you haven't, you can still pledge to buy a copy of the book that we are currently still writing. You can get your name in the back of said book. Just head to unbound.com/bottom.
And we've got new pledge rewards as well. We've got some, can we say what they are? The shitted pants and the junk mail.
That's it, yeah.
I like that, the shitted pants. I definitely
great.
want a pair of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've already got them.
Not
But
real shit, don't worry. If we had been... We found out it's actually cheaper to buy pants and shit in them than to get printed poo on them.
As a sort of raffle, every 100th pair will have genuine feces on.
There we go.
Thanks a lot for listening. See you next time.
bye.
Goodbye.